freshwater biome. Come on, let's go learn about it. Freshwater biomes can be found quite literally anywhere in the world. We can have them in forms of ponds, lakes, streams, and rivers. Most people will say that pH of fresh water is about 7, but here in the science world, we like to keep it a range of 6 to 8 due to the possible composition of the soil around the ponds. Here on Echo College campus, we have 7 freshwater ponds, but 2 of them are not. Shh. All the ponds on Echo College campus are retention ponds. Retention ponds are dug to store stormwater. These ponds have all different types of vegetation and species, which we'll learn right after climate.
Now we're going into climate. So, since freshwater can be found anywhere in the world, water temperature can range from 30 to 70 degrees depending on location and season. Although freshwater biomes can range in temperature, it does have a large effect on the organisms you will find, insects, fish, algae, etc. This is because there's preferred temperature based on the location and what the species can sustain. Colder water holds more dissolved oxygen, which is more beneficial for all organisms. If dissolved oxygen does run low due to global warming and rising temperatures, the organisms will die. And in Florida, the temperature usually ranges around 70 degrees.
Okay, so autotrophs in a freshwater ecosystem convert sunlight into energy that they use for food and part of their photosynthesis. Organisms like that, we have like algae, basic aquatic plants, and trees.
Now talking about heterotrophs, over here at this pond there's a lot of different species that will essentially feed off of each other, and these heterotrophs essentially gain nutrients through feeding off other organisms. While this may be a brackish pond, some freshwater species we have in here are tilapia, which essentially the tilapia feed off the algae in here, which are autotrophs, and the nhinga, the birds that live around all this pond, essentially feed off the tilapia, so it's like a cycle. In this instance, for this pond's actually brackish water. So a lot of the ponds on Eckerd campus actually have tarpon in them and snook and redfish because of this. But the primarily most of these ponds, such as this one and another one over there, are full of tilapia, which feed off, as we said before, the algae. Outside of this pond in particular, some of the ponds towards the backside of the campus contain another kind of heterotroph, which is the largemouth bass. And they'll primarily feed off of a lot of the different bugs and mosquitoes that will kind of fall into the pond and kind of congregate around the banks. And same with the nhinga and a lot of the other species like white egret that live here. These heterotrophs will also feed off the largemouth bass over there. Here we have a blue herring. Like a lot of the ducks in here, it's mostly feeding off of a lot of the grains and different aquatic plants along the weed bank right here. So essentially you can just see it slowly picking at the grass and the weeds and just essentially gaining some of the grains for nutrient. Blue herring will most likely feed off of, right now that one's a baby, so it's not going to feed off as much tilapia, but as they primarily kind of grow in size, they'll tend to feed kind of off a lot of the little top tilapia that are essentially spawning in here, as there's hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of them in this pond right here. Here we can also see that a lot of these animals or heterotrophs coexist with one another within these ponds in different biomes. Right here we actually have a Muscovy duck, which, similar to the blue herring, this is actually just a juvenile. Eventually it'll grow more in size, but just like the blue herring, you can see as it feeds upon the grains and different aquatic plants that reside just along this bank right in front of us. So within the freshwater biomes at Eckerd, especially with these ponds, yes, we do have largemouth bass and tilapia, which are different heterotrophs of freshwater biomes in Florida, but thankfully we do not have peacock bass and snakehead, which are actually an invasive species in Florida, which actually will coexist with a a lot of these with largemouth and tilapia throughout the state, but they can also impact a lot of these other native fish populations negatively by essentially growing at a faster rate and reproducing a lot quicker while also feeding on the same resource as other populations and depleting that population in doing so.
See these mangroves over here? They're a threatened species in Florida. So are the Florida panthers, the woodstocks, and green anoles. You remember when you're like biking around campus and you see those little crusty brown anoles? Yeah, they're pushing our friend green anoles out, and they're actually supposed to be the ones in, because those brown things are invasive species. It's green in Florida, not brown.
So what kind of impact do we as humans have on the freshwater biome? Well, folks, as you can see behind me here, we've got construction. This is human construction. As we move out and expand our habitat, what we do in essence is expand into the biome, freshwater. A lot of times we will completely fill in these freshwater sources so that we can make room for improvement. As well as freshwater is impacted by fertilizer runoff when we spray our fields and the fertilizer runs off into the water. So as well as all that, we also have dredging that happens as we dredge the bottom of these lakes and rivers, in essence killing the wild foliage that's on the bottom and impacting the heterotrophs that's in our freshwater biome. Now we also have herbicides that are sprayed a lot of times to control the algae growth in these freshwater sources. And when that happens, it has an impact on the oxygen levels in the water, which can greatly affect the life in the freshwater, the heterotrophs as well as the autotrophs. All right, now it's time for human impact, folks. So human impact, let me start again.
Let's think. Let's see.
All right, students, now it's time for human impact. As we move on.
Here we have the blue herring in its natural habitat, feeding off of primarily grass. Oh God, no, we need
habitat, expanding out and getting into the habitat, as well as, uh-oh. Here we see.
Someone else take that.
Okay. Okay.
Most people will say water.
Water holds more dissolved oxygen